Mr. Darrow,
Present.
Ms. Kalinowski. Here. Mr. Newmoff,
Here.
Vice President McClellan, President Kohler.
So at this point in time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Dr. Bill Reimer, who has helped us and guided us at other points in our history. And Bill,
Okay,
the meeting's yours.
okay, good. Let me first just walk you through what's in your folder. We'll start with the second page in the white side, the agenda for what we're going to try to do together. But I wanted you to just look through it. It starts with the governance team survey. That'll be part of summary. That'll be part of the agenda, whatever we set for that. Board protocols. I think you've seen those. I think those are ones that sort of like the ones you have here. The yellow side, and some of you got a beige along with yellow, but that's because we ran out of yellow.
Oh.
But the yellow side is just intended to be some things that maybe we will want as we get into some of the discussions and things. They might be of some help to us if we want. If they're not, we don't need to do anything with them. But what I wanted to start with was that second white sheet, the one that's got draft written all over it as an agenda, to just talk about how we might start together. And if you look at it, I finally, after my talking with all of you individually, and I tried to summarize that as best I could from my notes, from my memory. After talking to you individually, it really seemed to me that most of you, almost all of you, listed number one as one of the purposes that we really ought to discuss how the governance team will work together and get into more specifics about how we'll do some things together. The second one that I thought came out very strongly was a number of you said we need to establish just at least an outline, if nothing better, but the beginnings of a plan for what we think needs to get done during the next year at least. And then the third one was just again, it was raised by many of you, but it was that whole idea of how do we develop trust with each other? How do we begin to, and I wanted to point out to you that when I've done these kinds of retreats or work sessions with other boards in the past, it's not unusual at all when you have a couple of new board members coming in January. It's not unusual for the board to say, we've got to get to know each other. We've got to get to know each other. We've got to develop our trust with each other and so on. So I don't think you're terribly unique in that surfacing as one of the things you hope happens. And then I thought you also said that you really thought it was important to discuss how we're going to communicate with ourselves, with the staff, with the community. And just generally, how are we going to operate as a board, as a leadership team in a manner that really inspires confidence in the community, confidence by the staff, in all of you as the leaders of the school district. And that I think we can decide to do or not do, and that's up to you. I roughed this out, those four purposes, and then I went on to say, I think if we actually do the two things of really talking at length about how we're going to work together, get specific about it, that it would really be beneficial to all of you probably if you put some of that in writing, that you had it down afterwards, that look, we agreed we'd do this. So let's try in fact to do that to the best of our ability. And the same with if you get a rough outline of a plan or something, if we end the day with that, that would be good. The one thing the number 2, I doubt we'll have a lot of problems with. We may have differences of opinion with the agenda, but the bottom 2, the second one, second section, I don't think there would be. And those are the assumptions that I make, and I make those in good part from the conversations I had with all of you. The conversations I had with you, I'd hoped they'd be 15, 20 minutes. I had told you that. For a number of you, or for a few of you, they were around 20 minutes. But for a number of you, they were like hour-long conversations. They were long conversations, which was good. And it helped me to understand where you're coming from. And some of these things that I list as assumptions, these are my words from, frankly, what I took from my discussions with you. And that first one, each of us cares deeply about the welfare and future of New Albany schools. I didn't say that lightly. You individually, you said that in lots of different words. These are sort of my words summarizing it, but it really came from you. We all want to do what's best for the kids of our school system. I know those sound like, well, that's a given, but what I run into all the time when I do a lot of things with different boards and different school systems is almost everybody says that. Very few do that because other stuff gets in the way from it. The third one, we all want to see to it that our superintendent, treasurer, and board succeed. That again seems like a given, because when all of you succeed, I would argue probably the school system's going to succeed, or you're going to see to it that the school system succeeds. The fourth one, and that I just put in, that didn't come necessarily from all of you. We're willing to openly ask questions and offer input to help the group complete its tasks. I make that assumption. We're adults, and we don't even have to be agreeing adults. We can, at times we're going to be disagreeing adults, but we all want to do that anyway. I still want to, I'll say what I have to say, you'll say what you have to say, so on. And then the last one, we all want to develop an honest, cordial, and collaborative leadership team for this school district. That did come, again, from pieces from all of you, that there really is that desire to, we need to be able to work together. We need to be able to function together, because we'll be able to provide stronger leadership for the community and for our schools if we are able to do that, if we get a real functionality to what we do. And then what I wrote then as sort of the agenda, the actual things we do with, I wanted to take a little bit of time talking to you on an introduction about what you do and say matters. Go through the summary with you, or at least see what kind of responses you had to it from our talks together. Getting the agenda approved, discussing how we'll work together, discuss how we'll develop a plan for meeting the challenges of next year, and then the next one, discussion, improving our communication. Very frankly, I think that will become part of the fifth one, discussion, how will we work together if we decide to do that. And the sort of one that I didn't write down there that I think is a given, again, from talking with all of you, and from the fact that you are in fact a new governance team now because of the new members of it and the absence of the old members. And the one that's unstated there was we want to build trust. We want to build some trust between us. That won't happen just today. Hopefully it continues to begin. Hopefully it's already begun in some of the time you've had with each other. Whether you've agreed or disagreed. But my hope is that that's sort of the unstated thing that we hope happens as part of today, that we at least are making another step forward in that process. So I guess what I need from you is your reaction to just this, and whether or not you want to make changes to it, you want to make it as far as what you want to get done today.
I mean, I think I'm fine going through this list. I think as we talk about different things, other issues are going to come up, and I think we have to be willing to confront those, whatever they are. I don't know what's going to come up, but I want to make sure that if we find ourselves in disagreement about something, that we try to uncover what's there so that we can bring it to the surface and have a meaningful conversation and understand where each other's coming from on whatever the topic is. Again, I don't know what it is. I just want to make sure that we retain the ability to let questions and issues bubble to the surface so we can confront them.
See, I think you ought to be open to doing that, to being willing to do that. It's just that, and if you would want, I'll do this as facilitator. I'll try to also, if we start doing that and we're heading off, I'll try to also bring us back and say, okay, now maybe we need to make a quick decision here. Do we still want to spend more time on this particular issue? Because if we do, we're going to shorten some other stuff, and that's okay. But I'll try to keep reminding you of that just as a facilitator. I think that could be of some value to you, because then you can ultimately just say, okay, do we or don't we want to?
I think this is a great outline. As we go through it, I think there's a lot here.
Oh, there is.
So, I mean, if we don't get to it all, I won't feel like we failed, because this is each item is pretty big on here. But I think it's all good stuff.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know that we're gonna get through it all. Anybody else? Anything else?
I just would comment, I think the agenda is good. I think I would use an analogy. There's a lot of play-by-play here, and I think we could certainly go through this line item by line item and feel like we made progress. I do feel like there's a lot of, to use sports analogy, color commentary that goes along with this play-by-play, and it's really going to be important for us to be able to unpack some of that color commentary if we're going to make meaningful progress that's lasting in terms of how we operate and work together as a board and operate with the community going forward.
Yeah, well said.
I have a point of order. Where does lunch fit into this? Just so I know if I should be
Well, I was
eating
told
while
we were
we're
gonna
talking.
just start eating, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
We could just kind of-
I'm good with a working lunch. Working lunch is awesome.
Yeah.
I just, I'll push the microphone away from my mouth so it's,
So there's no crunching.
yeah, well, I can't promise.
Turn off your mic during the potato chips are on. Yeah.
Well, why don't you start eating, and I'll hesitate a minute, because I've got some things that I wanted to go through that introduction, and I want to also just real quickly run you through the summary of the interviews that we had. And I'm not going to read them or go through them or anything, but I wanted to make a couple of comments to you about them, and then see if you had any reaction, what your reactions were to them, because I think that's helpful to us. But I wanted to start with that introduction. What you do and say matters. That's profound, isn't it? I mean, no kidding.
Really?
But it does, and sometimes when I'm working with a group that's starting, because they're or starting over, as in this case, I think it's helpful to just all of us remember that our doing and our saying are almost equally important. The doing, what we do, is so important, and many times the most important part of what I do is how I do it. It still amazes me as an old man that you can do the same thing but do it in a different manner, and it makes all the difference in the world as to how it's received, how it's understood. It makes all the difference. But also, what we say matters, because what we say, I think, gets at one of the items a couple of you brought up about transparency. We want to be really transparent. One of you brought up, well, what in the world does that mean? I don't even know what is meant by that. You know, it depends on what the person means by that. And you're right, it does. But what we say, I think if we make it transparent, that really is going to be helpful because we don't surprise each other. And I would argue that's going to be one of the additional elements that's going to help with, are we going to, as a result of some of this, actually even enhance and develop greater trust with each other, just for what we say, but also how we say it.
Bill, a related, sorry to interrupt, but a related
No,
note.
let's do that. Let's do that regularly. So go ahead. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'll still apologize for interrupting. Along with how we say, being conscious of how we talk, a corollary to that is being conscious of how we think about the speaker. If we start with an assumption that the speaker, whoever is speaking from a position of good faith, then it's much easier to listen to what they say in a positive manner. If, however, we look at the speaker and we say, that person's an idiot, that person is my enemy, that person, I don't like that person, then we tend to hear, they may say exactly the same words, but we view those words much differently. We hear them much differently. So I think we not only, again, just to repeat, we have to be not only conscious of how we speak, but how we view the speaker, and make a conscious effort to the extent that we may start out with a, one viewpoint, but I think we have to be conscious of viewing the speaker, if we're going to be an effective team, viewing the speaker as coming from a place of good faith.
I think that's really good. I'm glad you added that to it. That fits with later on if we want to. April shared with me some research on building trust, and what you just said really fits right into it very, very nicely, Phil. And maybe we'll get to that. Maybe we won't. Maybe I'll just send it home with you. I have copies for all of you, so we'll send it home if nothing else. But I wanted to also emphasize that what you do, what you say, actually matters because it makes a difference. Some of you on the old board know, I think last year we looked at, or else the year before we looked at, there's actually research now that says governance teams' actions, the board's actions, the superintendent's action, they really do make a difference. They even make a difference in the achievement levels of children. And so it does matter what we do. And I would remind you, I know you know it, not only does what you say and what you do matter in regard to student achievement, but probably just as importantly, it makes a difference in the community and the staff's overall confidence in the school system, because you're the leaders of the system. And if they embrace your leadership, then they have, it just inspires confidence. When I teach a class at OSU and for people that want to be superintendents, and in that class, I always talk to them about how we need to do things in school systems put in a way that whenever the community or anybody from outside shines a spotlight on whatever area they're looking at of the school, that their reaction is, oh, wow, those people really know what the heck they're doing. That it inspires confidence. And we need to do things that way. And I would argue that as the primary leaders of this school system, all 7 of you need to do things in a way that it inspires confidence. And it's really difficult because you need to inspire confidence from the children. You need to inspire confidence from the community. You need to inspire confidence from the staff or in the staff and with each other. And sometimes those are at odds with each other. And that's what I think is so difficult about being leaders in school systems. And you guys have done it long enough, all of you, you know, you just don't always satisfy everybody. You just don't. That's the way it is. But I think, you know, doing, saying, thinking, even as Phil said, those are all separate, but they're also all very interrelated, and they just run together. So hopefully we'll keep reminding each other of that, not only this afternoon, but you guys will in the future too. Okay, look at the just very quickly, I want to bring your attention to the interview summaries. What do you love about New Albany schools? One of the reasons I decided to throw that in after I had told you I was only going to ask you 3 questions was because I had started thinking, you know, one of the things that can quickly bring together a new collection of individuals is if you can zero in on commonalities. And I just think it's so interesting, the comments that all of you made. There's just lots of positives. There were lots of things that really make you feel good. And within those is a lot of commonality. If you read somebody else's, I'm sure you thought to yourself, well, yeah, I feel that same way about that. I feel that same way about our staff, about our teachers. I feel that same way about the opportunities our kids have. You know, so I think there was a lot of commonality there. As I said in the sheet, I put together questions 2 and 3 because as it started coming out in your responses, they just seemed like they fit together, and that's why I did that. And when I listed then the topics that you seem to be talking about, I came up with those that I put in bold print, how we'll work together. And I had at least 6 of you saying that or something to that effect somewhere. I tried to list in the parentheses the specifics behind that, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to do all of those, even if we take on one of those things. But that's the way it is. Establish a plan, number 5. Inspire confidence. There were 5 that wanted that also. And then develop trust. There were 4 people that brought that up. And it seems to me those 1, 2, 3, 4 top ones are what we hope most happens today. And then the ones at the bottom, transparency only had 2 people mention it, but I would argue that transparency probably fits in with how we work together. And you know, it can fit into virtually everything we do. And then the last, that bold paragraph down there, those were just individual ones where one person said something to that effect. And probably some of those could have been put back up into some of the other categories, if you will. I just didn't do it. And then finally, what outcomes do you hope are reached with the retreat? I think a lot of those, I know I used a lot of those in trying to come up with, I think this is a decent outline for an agenda that we ought to attempt to do. Any comments about the summary? And by comments, I guess I'd start by asking you first, anything surprise you in there that you heard from your?
I think this thing that pleasantly surprised me was how much alignment there already is. And in terms of, I think it's a good thing that so many of us are aligned in terms of maybe what each of us has identified as an obstacle or roadblock to our success. And that is the whole notion of how are we going to work together? How are we going to communicate with each other and with stakeholders? And so I think that's a really good thing.
Anybody else? Anything that surprised you?
So the bold ones at the bottom are one-off statements. Under transparency where it says develop.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, those were like at least one individual said those. How about anything that you read in the summaries that you found yourself saying, I feel the same way about that, but you didn't say it?
Well, I have one that jumped right out to me, which was really refreshing to see, and I didn't say it, and it's a great opportunity for me to chime in on it. I know we won't get to this today, but just the revisiting the strategic plan and moving away from reinvent. I thought it was a great opportunity to bring back up that's how we started the school year. We said at our staff convocation on the very first day when the entire staff was together, we said we've gone through a lot together, and it's clear that we are really wrestling with this vision statement and that we as a staff want to revisit this. We want to move away from this word reinventing, and we talked about how reinventing has only ever meant how will this staff do even, evolve their practice to do what the students need for the future. And so that was a theme that we were already on. That was kind of a train that we were on. And then as we went into the election and we knew that we were going to have new board members, we didn't move forward with that because clearly you need to do that as a new board. And quite frankly, why I don't think we do it right away is because you need to do it with a new leader. So we had talked about that being a goal for this school year. We had talked about focus groups, we had talked about surveys, we had talked about completely revisiting the strategic plan, and then we put all that on hold. So I didn't see that, but it's like, that's another good thing to bring up that really was on our radar.
Yeah.
Has been on our radar, and is something that definitely the staff also want to have that conversation. It's not just parents in the community, so.
Anybody else, something that you read that you didn't say that you thought, yeah, I really feel the same way?
Under establish a plan, I think focus on the work of the district is probably, the glue for us right now, because we don't have, deep relationships with each other. If we can focus on the work, I feel like that keeps us on the right track. So I like to see that was a common thread for all of us, because I think it's really what we need to do.
Yeah. Good. Anyone else? Okay. Before we leave that summary, I have to apologize for that typo with the board meetings on that last page. I thought I had proofed it all. I'm my own secretary, and proofreader.
You gotta fire that person.
Yeah, that's embarrassing. But
Once you capitalized that spell check wasn't going to correct you.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, that moves us to working together. And that's big. That's really huge. And I'd call your attention, because maybe it'll help us if we sort of look at that first yellow sheet. I really put that down, or created that as just sort of a worksheet that might be something we could use to begin talking about and discussing. Okay, how do we go there? And I just tried to list some areas that I thought you might want to at least, gee, we ought to remember to talk about this or talk about that. And even after I was done with the sheet, I wrote trust at the bottom of the governance practices too. That hopefully that's where some of this ends up with us for us. Does anybody have any additional suggestions that you think, if we're going to start talking about working together? I thought you'd start with communication, but there's nothing important about this order of anything. If it'd be easier to get into discussions just by talking about governance practices, because those are just real straightforward, or can be, we can jump to that, or we can throw in something else if anybody's got anything they want to add.
I wonder if the sort of more macro discussion might help when we get into the governance practices. I do think that the communication issue, how we are going to work with each other, talk to each other, handle disagreements, present ourselves to the public, and assuring that we are all focused on the same goal and mission. I really think that's the place to start. And actually, Phil's done some work on that for us in terms of at least coming up with a draft of. Is it okay? I mean, would you be willing to share the work that you've done?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, it's, you got the one from yesterday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Wow, that's the first time anyone said that about me, especially in the school. Yikes. It took 56 years and here I am, the overachiever in school. Oh my.
It
So
really took you back.
it really did. So my thinking on how a team works together effectively is that we have a common goal. We know where the end game is. We know what it is we're trying to achieve. It's simple. It's memorable. It's something we can repeat. It's something that when we have disagreements, we can say, I really don't agree with you, but is that relevant to what we're trying to achieve? And if it's not, well, put it away and we won't waste time on it anymore. If it is relevant to what we're trying to achieve, we have to continue to spend time and figure out where we can gain agreement, at least sufficient agreement to move forward. But if it isn't part of it, well, let's not do it anymore. And over the years, as I've been on the finance committee and I go to school board meetings and I listen and talk to people about different things, I find that so many of the conversations don't seem to be focused on common purpose. They're individual purposes, which don't mean they're unimportant. It just means that we have to deal with an individual as an individual, but a common purpose is something we can work on as a team. So after talking with everybody, after having a couple of drafts and getting feedback on a couple of drafts and trying to incorporate what other people thought, as we look toward a new superintendent, and this is what this was really intended, was what sort of guidance can we give a new superintendent? What are we asking this person to do? And so what we ended up with is that what we're asking this superintendent to do is to create a culture of accountability that achieves the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student. So to repeat, what we're asking the superintendent to do is to create a culture of accountability that achieves the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student. And I'm pretty big on understanding what each word means, on having clarity on what each word means, to not leaving that up to chance. You know, we can each go to the dictionary and maybe we'll have a different dictionary and each word will have a different meaning. And if we try to parse it differently than each other, then we again won't have common purpose. The superintendent won't know what we as their employer expect of them. And so the way that I believe this should be read is to create a culture means the job of the superintendent is to make sure that everyone in the district, all of the staff members, everyone that ultimately reports directly or indirectly to the superintendent, has an expectation that the culture of the district is accountability for achievement. It's about outputs. It's about what we do for each student. You know, accountability takes many, many forms. Accountability is, do we have clear measurements? Do we have clear goals? Do we talk about it? It involves coaching. It involves a collaborative approach. Accountability involves all those things. A great leader needs to make sure that they do all of those things. At the end of the day, however, accountability is what matters. And accountability for achievement. It's about outputs, not inputs. Obviously, you need inputs. You need people. You need great people. You need funding, right? You need the community. You need students. So all of that matters, but it's about achievement. And then the best academic and developmental outcome. It's not second best. It's not number 2 or 3. It's not being in the middle of the pack. It's being the best. You know, I think when I talk to people in the community, when I think about what I want for my community, I mean, I live here. What I want is the best. I want this school to be the best. I drive by, I think it's a really great looking school. I know people who attend here. I know teachers, I know staff members. I mean, I want it to be the best. And I think the community does too. And it's the best academic and developmental outcomes. Academic comes first, because first and foremost, it's a school. It's about academics. Recognizing, and this was some great input from others on our team here, that, well, it's not just academics, and you're right, it isn't. It's about the whole child. It's about sports. It's about music. It's about the arts. It's about other things. Those other things are important. They are secondary to academics, but they are important and have to be part of the discussion. They have to be part of what we expect of people. And then outcomes for each student. This is a recognition, this is an effort to make clear that it's not students as a group, it's each student, because of the roughly 5,000 kids that are in the school, they're all individuals. And we expect the superintendent to create a culture that treats each student as well as each staff member as an individual. And so that's, when you wrap it all up, what we've talked about is hiring a superintendent whose job it is to create a culture of accountability that achieves the best academic and developmental outcome for each student.
What I love about this is probably the first thing we have done that actually was really collaborative. And, you know, we had good discussion, we had good debate, and I think, you know, this is a great outcome for us. So I think it's an example of our ability to work well together.
I think it is too. And as I've spent a lot of time thinking about it through its various, what do I want to call it? Like the 2.1 version as opposed to the whatever. Yeah, thank you very much. But the word accountability, the culture of accountability, as you were explaining it today, in my mind, it's not just a culture of accountability for staff. It's a culture of accountability for the board. It's a culture of accountability for students. They have to be responsible for their own outcomes. It's a culture of accountability for parents and a culture of accountability for the community, that we all have to focus on the outcomes we want, and each one of us is responsible for producing those results
Couldn't agree more. And so I think that's how we should describe it, is it's a culture of accountability across the board.
across the board.
I think you're right too, that the brief statement really begs for full buy-in to it. It really begs for the more in-depth explanation of what this is, what we intend this to mean.
Mhm.
That's so important. The explaining paragraph, if you will, is just vital if you're going to have a lot of people embrace it and say, wow, yeah, that's what we want.
Yeah, because it's an opportunity for mischief if everyone's defining it differently. Because somebody says, well, I'm doing that. They say, well, you're doing good work, maybe not in alignment with where we're trying to go.
Mhm.
So,
Right. And the original, your original work actually included
Mhm.
a word-by-word definition, which I think was very helpful to me as well. But I think, I like it because it's student-centered, right?
Mhm.
And it will absolutely help us prioritize work
Mhm.
and make decisions regarding limited resources. If every decision we have to make, we look at that, we are then able to evaluate, is this something that's going to support that work or is it not? And if it's not, then it gets pushed to the bottom of the pile.
And you raise another great point, Laura, which is we talked about incorporating the limited resources, and the more I thought about it, the more I just kept coming back to that's a given. There are limited resources. When we look at a budget, there's only so many dollars involved. So if the purpose that we're hiring a superintendent for is to do this, is to create a culture of accountability for everyone that's focused on what's best for each student, then we figure out how to divvy up the money so that it's focused on that.
Exactly.
And I feel like if that's the purpose of the superintendent, that's the purpose of the board as well, right?
Well,
If
we're hiring
agreeing
them.
on that.
That's kind of why I decided to ask Bill to bring it up and talk about it, because I agree with you, Debbie. I think that our purposes, we're all on the same team. So we all have to be working towards the same ends and with the same understanding. I don't know, you probably haven't had a chance to see this before. I don't know what your initial reactions might be, Becky or April.
Yeah, I have a really great feeling about it. I have a really strong reaction to it. I think it does capture, and I'm looking at even the end of your note there where your goal was to keep it at 10 words for clarity, which I really appreciate that. I think that's exactly what you need. I agree that it needs to be something that everyone can own and say and understand, that we are of one mind as an organization. This is what we are here to do.
Did
This
you
is what we're here to do and achieve. And I think that it does apply across stakeholders. I think that the clarity of the focus on concrete outcomes that are both academic and developmental, but that you found a way to capture the whole child in a very short amount of words is powerful. I love the for each student distinction. I think that's very critical, and truly the nature of what every great educational organization should be doing is asking itself not just what are the holistic outcomes, but what are the outcomes at the student level. And then that's another whole conversation about metrics in education that tend to be very aggregate and holistic. But I think that you've really done a great job of a very tightly packed phrase that captures the heart of what the district needs to do.
Anybody get bonus points for
Very
identifying all the?
impressive. Yeah.
about you, Becky?
I agree. I think and it's not a caution because I think it's really great, but it's the whole buy-in of all of the groups because like you said, it's not just the accountability of one section, it's the accountability for all and that we're all in this together. So I think if it starts with the board and continues with the superintendent, then it should flow out. And I think it's fantastic that you have something that everyone from the board to, the custodian should be able to read that, recite it, own it, believe it. And I think that would go a long way to and bringing everyone together and helping us with the focus. I think it's great.
I think it also really supports the mission that we have about developing academically successful, what is it?
High achieving,
Oh,
ethical,
high
self-directed,
achieving.
intellectually curious
Yes,
citizens
high
of the
achieving.
world.
I remembered, too late. But anyway, that's part of the problem with it.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's exactly right.
Yes,
If you can't recite it off the tip of your tongue, then it means that it isn't really what people are focused on,
Yeah,
right?
that's correct.
And that's
Correct.
that,
But I mean, I think that, however, this statement, the statement that we've developed is not in conflict with. the
Absolutely
mission
not.
statement. It seems to support it. I
It
should have
can-
practiced that
yeah.
mission
To-
statement.
I have a potential negative
Oh.
reaction, but not mine, but I've heard, and this came to me from actually some people in Olentangy who a couple of years ago said to me, we're the board is considering or thinking about, I don't know if they were or not, because I don't stay in touch up there, but considering changing their statement from we're going to facilitate maximum learning for every student. And they wanted to change that. I don't know to what, but I was, and this is why I said this might be a negative. They claimed that they wanted to start thinking about doing that because too many parents were throwing it back in their face.
Mhm.
And they said, this person that was talking to me said, so what do you think of that? And I said, well, that was always one of the things that I thought was the blessing about the statement.
absolutely.
Because people would literally say, well, you're not maximizing learning for my student. And so what's the response? The response is, well, then you and I need to talk because we want to be maximizing learning for your students and every student. And so but you do get it literally thrown back in your face.
Great.
But I think that's a blessing. I don't think that's a bad.
Have at it. If the people don't think, if the community, if parents, teachers, members of the community, all students don't think we're doing what we said we're going to do,
Mhm.
tell us.
Yeah.
Hold us accountable.
Then you can do something about it. You know.
I do want to echo Becky's caution, or at least tee that up as a discussion for all of you, that it's my understanding, although that was before I came, that over 100 people were part of writing the former vision and mission statement. So back to transparency and engagement, how will you explain to all of those people back in 2010 who were part of that work, this evolution? Just from a communication standpoint, I think we have a responsibility to at least those people.
But we're not at this point proposing that this become the new vision.
Okay.
We wrote it really to help us start thinking about the profile we need to develop for our next superintendent.
Right.
And to maybe center your
Our-
plan,
our
if you
work.
start planning
Yeah.
for what you're doing this next year.
Exactly. Yeah, we
it
don't
sort of centers your
anticipate
thought,
that
right?
this would replace our
Agreed.
current.
Okay.
Without discussion. I mean, we had that
Right.
conversation, that
We
the
did.
community came together and spent a lot of time coming up with a vision and mission. And so we are very much aware that this is for us. This is for the leadership team. Like, community elected us as the leadership team. Part of leadership is putting forth a plan of what we're going to accomplish and how we're going to hold people accountable. And I think we need to have a short number of words. At least for me, when I'm trying to do something, I need to know what I'm doing. And so I think that this is for us to be focused on hiring a new superintendent, to focus that superintendent on the job we are hiring them to do. The community hired us to do this.
That being said, I think there'll be a disconnect if we don't somehow marry the two at some point because, you know, if the board and the superintendent are all marching to this, it would only make sense for it to be broader. As we said, the community and, you know, all the key stakeholders involved, the kids. So I think we need to take it to the next level of getting community input to it at some point because there just has to be alignment eventually.
Exactly. And what April talked about earlier is really a good definition of the problem that we find ourselves in right now. We did have quite a bit of discussion about revisiting the strategic plan, but in my mind, it makes no sense to do that until we have our next leader in place.
I agree.
I think, you know, I think that the best leaders are those who probably, and I'm sure that you struggled with this too, because the plan was pretty much in place when you got here. But April was able to put her own interpretation on a pre-written plan, but I think really it probably would have been more effective to have had you involved in the creation of the strategic plan in the first place. So my recommendation would be to make this, you know, certainly within the first 12 months of a new superintendent's tenure, make this a priority.
Cool.
Yep.
I'll just to close the loop on it, I'll put together another not a cheat sheet, but a definition sheet, you know, how each word, how we view the intent of each word and how they all work together.
And that's something then that you guys can share with whoever it is we choose to do the search, right? Get them started with that right away.
Can you read the short phrase again?
To create a culture of accountability that achieves the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student.
This is an old man over here. Create a culture of accountability that, thanks.
Make it easier.
Sorry.
The best academic.
If you think I'm picky about a short number of words for that sort of thing, just wait till you see my pickiness on PowerPoint. I have a 6-slide maximum.
That's a good discipline.
And no
no
spreadsheets.
text bullets, no spreadsheets.
No spreadsheets on PowerPoint.
Can I just do a little check-in here because
I might need a tutorial on that.
3 of us have had quite a bit to say. I want to just check in with you, Paul, and see.
Oh, sure. Well, I haven't said a lot because part of the time, you know, Phil and I have spent a lot of time together, and when Phil started talking about his initial draft during our discussions in the executive session relative to the hiring of the superintendent, it wasn't a surprise to me that a lot of what was initially thrown out was something that I very much agree with. And I was kind of revisiting my notes from our first board meeting where I said, I believe we'd all like to return focus to providing excellent educational outcomes for the children of New Albany Plain local schools. And yet through agree with Debbie, the collaborative discussion, you know, we added best, we added each, we added academic and development, you know, with John's input on the broader student with a lot of discussion about putting academics at the forefront. And then I really like how Laura has added this accountability and following the theme of adding definitions to that. What does that mean? Not just to one stakeholder, but the broader stakeholders in the community. So I think it is heartening, and I agree with Debbie that, again, this is an example of where we have been able to come together and really stay focused on the task at hand. And that's a positive, and it's, I think it's improved as we've added a few words. Yes, Phil, we're sorry, but it does, I think, send us in a good course going forward. And I would also agree with Debbie that we, at some point along the way, need to go through the proper vetting and discussions with our communities and figure out how does this become part of the broader themes that we put forth as a district as to what we're trying to accomplish.
I really like the culture of accountability and the broad definition of that, because that enables certainly parents to throw it back in your face. But it also enables the school staff to throw back into parents' face, you're not doing your part in a partnership with us to make this happen to the maximum degree. And we need more help from you on that. And so that's a two-way street that sometimes you need to be able to travel.
I also want to check in with John.
No, this is the result of a good collaborative discussion. I like it. It is very simple for everyone to understand. And let's keep going.
And it's perfect as the forerunner or the overreaching thought to go on with anything else on, well, how are we going to work together?
Exactly.
And it's a neat starting point that, yeah, we're all really comfortable. That's a huge move, I think. Toward, you know, we talked about trust and working together positively. And I remember what you said earlier, Phil, about how the way we think about each other. Well, when you start thinking about each other and you have maybe some vibes that aren't good, remember this, you all said, hey, we embrace this, because there's a commonality there that's just going to be huge for you as you go through some of the rest of how are we going to, you know, the detail of how we're going to work together. What do you want to take next? We took common purpose. Good. Do any other homework, Phil?
Lots.
This is accountability right here. Come on, pal.
Lots.
About communication, you want to start there? That makes sense?
Sure.
Okay. Communication with each other.
Well, let me just start off by pointing to this conversation that we've just had here. We were focused on the work. We really were operating from a place where we truly do believe that every one of us cares deeply about the school district. Every one of us is really concerned about the best possible outcomes for each student, and we stayed focused. And I consider that to be very successful. As far as trying to extrapolate from that to more general themes, I think what I have learned from the exercise is that we can have robust discussion, and there is a willingness to remain flexible and to give and to take and defend a position, but then say, oh, well, that's a good idea too. And I think that those communication skills are going to be vitally important as we move forward. And I think that as we get better at that, then the personalities or the past history will become less and less important. And my hope is that we can shake off past history and just move forward, knowing that we do have the potential to become a very strong team working together. If anybody wants to react to that or disagree.
I'm a perpetual optimist.
You know, I also want to build on what Phil said earlier about, and you and I talked about this, just, you know, believing that each one of us is coming from a place of wanting to do good work here, and granting each other that, you know, that minimal amount of foundation to work together. I think if we can do that, we can start building on that. I think the biggest struggles we have interacting with people is when we feel they're coming from a place that is not constructive or that may be destructive or that is not aligned with your goals. So I just think, you can't emphasize that enough, that if we can just give each other the basic, belief that we all want to do good work here, I feel like that would be huge. And I don't think it's small. I think we actually need to work on that. I don't know, how to speed up getting there, but probably conversations like this help a lot.
Anybody knows any good psychologists? The process is cognitive behavioral modification. You change the way you think. And by changing the way you think, you change the way you see things, the way you hear things, the way you perceive things. And it takes work. I mean, it takes effort. When you start off thinking somebody's not so nice of a person, it takes work to force yourself to say, yes, they are. So that when they start talking, it changes how you view them. It really is not a matter of just putting on rose-colored glasses, because we're not saying that anybody should do that, right? I mean, we're all individuals. We believe passionately in the things that we believe passionately about. We need to be free to express our beliefs and our passions about those things. Yet when somebody else talks, we need to look at that person and say, I disagree with them completely, but they're not a bad person. I disagree completely, yet I hear what you're saying, and I'm willing to listen and take it in a positive way. And it takes effort, but that's all it is. And there are books about it. Some are really thick. The first book I looked at about it was 700 and some pages. I said, I'm never going to read that. But there's other stuff about it, and it's actually pretty simple as long as you just apply it in practice. It works.
I would submit that even if you aren't there mentally, the one thing you can control is your own behavior and your own approach to things.
Mhm.
So even if we're not there, we can start acting as if we were there. And then we have more and more positive interactions. And sooner or later, we're going to believe it.
It's a virtuous cycle, not a vicious
Mhm.
cycle.
Yes.
You change the way you think about someone, and it changes how you act toward that someone.
And also
And when
in
you
reverse.
change how you act towards someone, it changes how you think
Yeah.
toward them.
I agree.
And that's why it's a virtuous circle.
Mhm.
I won't spend too much time on psychology here, but
Phil has a study to back everything he says. It's great to work with Phil.
just don't ask for citations.
I was gonna just ask for that.
Don't you dare.
That's just the doctoral student. We'll send out a reading on cognitive behavior therapy.
Can we talk about one of the other pieces that I think is so important and that ties in with this is the element of respect. And that, to me, the most important obligation we have to each other is there are two. One is that we have to be honest with each other, and the other is that even when we disagree, we have to have respect for the other person. And I believe that also then applies to our interactions with all of our other stakeholder groups. We need to have respect when we're talking with staff, with parents, with the community. All of those groups are deserving of our respect and our attention.
Indeed.
Would you like me to sing the Aretha Franklin song?
Okay.
You posed that like a dare. So
You walked into that one? Only if Paul joins in.
It's part of that developmental education that I didn't get. Yeah.
Oh, my.
So So is it fair to say that you want to communicate with each other in generally civil, honest, respectful, and open manner? Is that a stretch for anybody? Sound like I'm talking to a bunch of kids. You know,
It's easy
but aren't we all sort of at times? I just think so often we as adults, we are like children, and we, you know, we carry, when I'm aggrieved by someone or I'm demonized by someone, I just have great difficulty shaking it. And so I typically write them off. And thank goodness, they seldom had to work with somebody like that. But when, and you know, if that has happened at all, and now you are thrown into a batch where you do have to work together, it's very difficult. You have to just be able to say, I've got to set that aside. For the greater good, I've got to set aside the fact that, yeah, this happened to me. And one of the ways I finally found, as I matured a little bit through my life, one of the ways I found that I could do it was in my faith. I am taught that everybody comes up short. Everybody, we all are sinful, for instance. And so it finally dawned on me one day years ago that I can't carry on the aggrievement or the fact that this person did something terrible or demonized me, because maybe I've done this much less bad things than that person did. But in the eyes of God, it makes, and I hate to be being religious with you right now, but it makes no difference. And it really dawned on me, that's really true. I mean, it truly makes no difference. And so I've got to behave accordingly.
The challenge is that it's easy to say that we'll do all these things.
Yeah.
You know what? The challenge arises when there's something you really do believe passionately about, where you know, I want to confront something and somebody else doesn't like it, or somebody else wants to confront something and I don't like it. You know, many people in my experience working with teams, actually most people are uncomfortable with confrontation. Now, if you unpack the word, you know, confront just means to face the truth. It isn't inherently negative. Just like, as I said at the first board meeting, when I grew up in a family, you know, where argument was sport, argument is not inherently negative, and neither is confrontation. It means that we have to be willing to confront the other person's truth. If I say something, it's because that's what I think. And if somebody says, you know, that's crap, then say, well, I don't really think so, and here's why. But a lot of people just aren't comfortable, and as a result of that discomfort, we don't tend to, we may not actually confront it because it just gets unsaid.
There's ways to say things, though, I think.
It's how we do it.
Yeah, that are more offensive or less offensive to the receivers. So, you know, I feel like some of maybe the misunderstanding that has been between some of us is not so much what gets said, but the way it gets said. And so I just think we before we say things, we need to think about how it's going to feel to receive it. I don't know if that's making sense, but it's not so much making the point. It's you know, how you present your point.
That's certainly the case. That goes along with politeness, right? I mean, you want to be polite and respectful. You don't intentionally offend someone. Yet I'm one of those people, when you look at the word accountability, I'm one of those people who says offense can never be given. It can only be taken. I have control over how I perceive someone else's words. So I can never give offense to somebody. They can only take offense. Now, if they take offense at something I said, I have an obligation to think about what I said and see if I had the intent of being offensive, right? But I have control over my action. I have control over my responses. I have control over my emotions. I don't have control over anybody else's. I have influence, but I don't have control. So it's just, while I hear you, it is one of those things where I'm like, okay, yeah, I didn't really like that, but I'm perfectly calm and it's fine. Because it's my responsibility to control myself.
I'm not sure I 100% agree with you on this, because I do think that sometimes offense is intended. And so the one who is presenting, it has an objective
Sure.
to make that impression. So I think that, I agree with you that the only person that you can control or be really ultimately responsible for is yourself. And as a receiver, you have an obligation to manage your response. But I also do believe that there are times when, for whatever reason, offense is definitely intended.
Oh, no doubt.
And the way you get past that, I think, is in a team, is again to keep going back to our basic beliefs about each other. We all want what's best for kids. We all want to do the right thing for the school district, right? So we have a dearly beloved former board member, and he and I used to get into it quite frequently. And if he's watching, which he probably is, he knows exactly who I'm talking about. But we would have these intense conversations, intense. And I can remember so many times saying, I agree with what you're saying. I can't handle the way you're trying to present it, that just, take a moment, step back. I know where you want to go and I want to support you, but let's think about the words we're going to use and how we're going to do it. And to be fair, he often did that for me as well. So,
and that's the answer, Laura. See, while I agree that people can intend to cause a reaction, I'm absolute on my belief that offense can only be taken, it can never be given, because I still have control. But if I think somebody's trying to get under my skin, then in a team environment, my obligation is to call them on it. My obligation is to confront that issue, because that then becomes the issue, right?
I agree.
Seems like you were trying to get under my skin. What's up with that? And you try to bring that out so you can see what's really going on. But these are the barriers to open communication. These are the barriers to honesty. If we're not willing to confront those things because it's so uncomfortable sometimes, then it goes unsaid. And then
it explodes.
Exactly, because then then you start internalizing all of that stuff, and you feel like you can't be heard, and you feel like you can't speak, and so that's where people start then undermining, right? Because you need an outlet for all this stuff that you're not willing to get out in a group, so you start getting it out onesie twosie.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I just have to comment. I mean, I agree with most of what's being said here. It is one of those examples. I would say that this is a very black and white conversation with a lot of elephants in the room based upon prior conversations. So it does, to the point of open communication and trying to deal with things as they happen, as opposed to creating situations where somebody blows up or where somebody creates that lens that they're looking at that person expecting that it's an offense is attended, whereas it may be an unintentional offense. That's where we've got to move toward. And the only way I know how to do that is to have the real-time communication and trying to deal with things as they happen. Now, we didn't all get to this room together until January 2nd. So there was a lot of time for things to build up. And I think that's where, one of our challenges going forward is how do we have real-time communications, try to talk to each other before we're assuming offense is intended or assuming that somebody has something in mind that's outside of the statement that we kind of all agreed upon around this table here in the last 15 minutes.
Do you want to talk about some of the elephants in the room? Would that be helpful, do you think?
In this forum? I'm not sure.
Damn, I forgot my elephant stuffed animals. Elephant stuffed animals, you know, you put them right there.
I was going to mention for the audience, if anybody's watching, when Laura and I are waving, there's a fly in here. We're not waving off each other's comments.
Thanks for the clarification. The fly would
Not
not
discarding
show up
comments.
on,
Yes, exactly.
on video.
That's right. The fly would be too small.
Why is
Done
she
with you.
waving her hand?
All right.
I thought they were speaking to you, Phil.
I know they're speaking to me. That goes without saying. I'm used to that. And I don't take offense.
But okay, can I make another point? You wouldn't take offense because that's your style.
I know.
I
There's-
would take offense because that's my style. So I do think we have to have a recognition that not all of us are alike. And
We need our Myers-Briggs.
yeah, I think that would be a good
Mhm.
exercise for us.
I
to
think
do.
that's
That probably
really,
would be good
yeah.
sometime.
I think it makes sense because you have to figure out how each person works and perceives. So someone may be just trying to find out how something works. And they may ask and it comes across as accusatory, but that's not how they mean it.
Mhm.
And I think that's just getting to know each other and figuring out how do you work, how do you talk, how do you think. You're not really accusing, you're just trying to find out.
And I can tell you right now, I'm way more sensitive than you are. Just from our personality types.
Yes, we've shared our Myers-Briggs type
Myers-Briggs.
indicators with each other and thought they were a reasonably good fit. But, you know, as I've told people over the years, is you can't hurt my feelings because I have none. So it's just fine.
I'm accused of that.
Well, that might be for another day for us.
Yeah.
I do think that would be interesting.
It'd be good
That-
for us.
And then a
Mhm.
willingness perhaps to be flexible with each other.
And help us understand, you know,
Where-
how we process things.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Not to keep going back to readings, but there are actually readings about how that affects what someone else desires and how you work with them.
Mhm.
You know, so you can read Matrix on, you know, someone that's an ENFJ really they want this type of information, they want it to be presented in this way, this is how they want to be talked with, you know, I mean. There's
And-
some real specific guidance
Yeah.
in that research.
And you try to do that, right? Because it's more effective.
Yes,
Um,
you can be a lot more successful when you present information the way somebody needs to receive it.
Well, and you also, you're sort of forced to open your mind up to the fact that there's really nothing wrong with April. That's just April. You know, that's just Bill. There's no right and wrong to it. It's just who we are and how we are. Unless we're truly evil people, which I've been accused of being, but yeah. Communication with each other. Want to go anyplace else with that?
Would this be a good time to take a look at those board protocols? At least the communication part of it, or do you want to do that?
You can, we can. Those were intended to be just for, you know, if we wanted to look at something, or you wanted to do anything. I don't know where you want this to end up. I would really encourage you to end up, whatever you start putting down, to really be making notes. I've noticed some of you are, I'm trying to too. And then we had a great start with that common purpose statement. And then from there to start really keeping some notes of where do you want this to go? Because I think you should eventually, and whether you call them protocols or whatever you do, whether they're like these or not, that doesn't really matter. But eventually you ought to put all of your reactions of things that you find you agree on. Like we generally agree that we're going to communicate with each other with civil, honest, respectful, and openly. You know, that was one of the things, at least I jotted down. And whatever else we would say, I think you should eventually put these things in writing and have a copy of them. So you know, look, we we agreed to this. We like this.
Another thing I think we should try to work on is, before we get into arguing our own point, just trying to understand where each other's coming from. Because I think, maybe just from our history of campaigning and things that were said before we all sat on the board together, there's an assumption that we know where each other is coming from, and that may not be accurate. I remember being in a facilitation where the facilitator talked about there's an apple in the center of the room, and this side of the table is saying, that it's disgusting and there's a worm in it and it's rotted, and this side of the table saying, is a beautiful red apple, I can't wait to eat it, it's so shiny. And that side was seeing a half rotted apple, and this side was seeing that the perfect apple. And we were both right. And without hearing each other, you don't ever see that, there's valid points, and maybe more than one point is a valid point. So it's kind of trying to get to, I guess, just understanding, what's at the root of why someone feels so passionately about something. Because I believe we're all really bright, capable people in this room. And, my concern around that statement is that it's not going to be hard to align on a statement like that. It's going to be the how, where we're going to have a lot of debate, and we're going to need to try to listen with some intent to understand each other, and not always just to make our own point or to win that argument. So it's just kind of trying to listen to understand each other.
Old Covey statement, so.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And those are fun exercises. It's, you go into those exercises thinking that, what the hell is your problem? I mean, this thing, this perfect apple, and the other people are going, man, you are strange, because this thing's disgusting, and yet you don't know, right? Until the latter part of the facilitation, and the facilitator flips it around and goes, they're not crazy. So, you raise what I think is the biggest elephant in the room, frankly. And we've kind of danced around this periodically over the first few meetings. For me, and speaking only for me, the biggest elephant in the room that I think impacts our work together so far is we have a different view of what the election meant. We have our own view of what the election meant, of what the campaign meant, of what the issues were. So then we come into the, okay, we're elected, and now we're all together, and yet we got here from a different perspective and with different views. And I don't think we've ever had that conversation as to, what do I think it means? What do I think the mandate was? What does Paul? What do you? Laura, what do each of us think was going on, and what the outcome means, and what the community now expects from us?
And maybe it's okay that we all got elected on a different platform.
It's perfectly okay, because it's what the community did.
Well, and that's the thing. So maybe what the answer is that, the community wants to hear from all of us, wants all of these broad perspectives to be shared with each other to get to the best outcome.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So then we have to also agree that we each bring a valid, no one person has a stronger mandate than another person in terms of, what we bring to the conversation, or what we bring to, what we feel we were elected on. It's all equally important and equally valid. Would you guys go so far as to agree with that?
Yeah, because again, we were each elected, right? So members of the community, individual voters went into the voting booth and cast votes, and the result is that 5 of us are sitting here.
They put us together.
So yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more.
How about you, Paul?
I'm not sure I understand the question, this, what's left, but I think certainly everybody was elected in a different context, in a different year in many cases, in some cases. And we all are here to we're all here to rally around that statement that we just made of achieving the best developmental outcomes for each student in academic and developmental outcomes for each student in New Albany. So that's what they've elected us to do. The election does certainly create some different lenses that perhaps Phil and I would have a different lens than what the three of you would have a different lens. And sorting that out as we make decisions moving forward to achieve the outcomes we desire, that's going to be our challenge. I mean, I feel like I'm speaking in strategy speak here, but I mean, I'm not disagreeing. You were elected. You have every right to bring your opinion to the table as each of us do. And we need to be respectful in discussing different opinions. I was going to ask your apple analogy at the end of the seminar. Did they agree to label it a clean, shiny apple or a dirty, rotten apple? And
It was both.
It's both.
It's
Yeah.
both.
Yeah.
There's one half is not good. The other half is good.
That's the purpose of the exercise.
I would suggest that you all have the mandate of your statement. That's the common mandate you have. I don't think you'd get argument out in the community about that. Probably. But you'd get argument if the two new people claimed they had a separate mandate from the other three people. You get great argument, I think, out in the community from that. But again, if you can center back on some commonality, to me, there's your mandate. Because nobody will argue that.
Sorry, Bill, I'm a visual guy and it's not good, but again, you got 5 circles, whether it's us 5 around the table or the other candidates, there's a lot of common ground in the middle. And that's where we got to find a way to come together. There's no doubt. There's probably some things that I disagree on relative to others in this table around things on the edges. And we may never agree, but we're still going to have to make some difficult choices going forward in terms of achieving the outcomes. And that's where we're going to have respectful conversation and come up with the right answer.
What do you think, John?
I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, I do too. I think, and this goes back to how the information has been perceived rather than perhaps the intent in sharing the information. But I'm just going to be perfectly honest here and tell you that the rhetoric about mandate feels very divisive to me. All 3 of you were elected, possibly for different reasons, because you had, different messaging and different points of view. And John and I were also elected, and although our messaging was pretty aligned, we definitely had some different points of view as well. So no one of us is any more important than each of us, right? So to me, we've got to let go of things that are perceived as being things that separate us rather than things that are going to bring us together to do our job. So
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have to be able to confront it if it comes up, right? If we find ourselves going off topic and assuming ill motive, then we have to be able to say, what the heck's going on here? And we have to be able to say, well, this is what I think's going on. And if you don't agree with me, then you have to feel comfortable in saying, well, I don't think that's right at all. Here's what I think is going on. And we have to be able to have that conversation.
I think the conversation is absolutely critical. I think that the use of the word mandate is not productive. I'm not certain I'm not certain that everyone who voted voted for a certain unified mandate. Because if that had happened, Debbie wouldn't have been here. So rather than, I think, concentrate on that, what we need to do is we all represent everyone in the community, right? That's our job. We don't represent specific constituencies. Our job is to funnel and try and figure out what's best for everyone.
And that's the way we bring the community back together too, around the schools.
Yeah.
So maybe that's at the heart of it is, how do we understand what the community wants moving forward as a team versus what they kind of said they wanted during our elections?
Yeah, and I think we have to be leaders in this regard because it has been a really difficult 18 months for the community and for staff and for everybody who cares about the schools. So if we can model the way to take disparate points of view and bring them together in a respectful, civil, honest, and open manner around a common goal, then I think that we'll be doing a big part of our jobs because once we start to trust and believe that that is what we are indeed doing and we are capable of doing it well, then I think that confidence will build in the community and among our staff and all these other groups that have been a little bit fractured will start to come together as well. I agree with you. We are going to disagree on the specifics. I know we will, but that doesn't bother me as long as the community knows that rock bottom, we do all want the same things, and that's what we need to keep focusing on is that, you and I absolutely want to do what's best for kids. And we absolutely want to leave the school district in a better place than where we found it. That the how of how to get there, we will no doubt have robust discussion about. But I want to reassure the community that don't worry, because we have this common bedrock understanding of what needs to be done. Well, I've finally done it. I put a whole room to sleep.
What do you think,
We're
Bob?
thinking.
As I said in that first board meeting, this is an opportunity for the community to achieve what we just spoke about. And if in terms of achieving the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student, that's where we have to stay focused. We came into this in different perspectives, in different elections. One of the blessings of this mixed election, and Debbie, relative to having the situation with the write-in candidate, we might have had a different outcome had we not had a write-in. That said, the blessing that I've drawn from this is we have to work together, and therefore we have the opportunity to bring this community together and all the stakeholders. And we've had discussions about what that means in community outreach, and we're going to get into that. But that means the entire community and driving toward that goal. So
I'm trying not to be offended by you saying.
Yes, I understand. And that's why you.
Might have had a different outcome because I feel like people clearly voted for me for a reason, Paul. So.
Yeah. And that's why you asked me what I was thinking, and I took the bait, if you will. But I really was not trying to, I did not intend any offense.
Yeah, I got more votes than either
Yeah.
one of you.
We scratched that for the record.
Yeah. The outcome that we want to achieve at its core, as we discussed 30 minutes ago, is what binds us together. On my little chart is the center here. And we can't, if we do go too far in the past, we may not allow scabs to heal and wounds to move on, and we move on about the business. I think this discussion about communication and respect and differences of opinion is how we operate as a board together. And you guys get tired of hearing me say this, that I've got 11 siblings and we don't always agree, but we have to find a way to work together going forward. So I did not intend any offense, but I only brought it up because, again, it does contribute to that lens of where we're coming from and where perceptions and where we feel like the community might be or may not be, depending upon your lens of perspective. So I'm glad that you raised it right now, that you felt offended, because I did not intend offense. And again, it is trying to pull out one of those elephants in the room that, maybe we need to have some dialogue about to be able to move forward. At least we know where we come from.
Yeah, and that's part of your openness with each other, if you're really going to be able to function together.
So, Paul, were you surprised that we were able to put this statement together as easily as we were?
I'll answer that in a different way. I've not been on the board before this, so that was my first executive session. I was pleased that we were able to come out of there with a rough draft that, we didn't come out of there with a draft. We had a lot of good discussion. I think everybody agreed. We had a lot of good discussion, and I'm glad that we've gotten this far this quickly.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking is because honestly, I think one of the things that happened as a result of that work that we did was that I was really pleasantly surprised to find that what I had feared was not reality based on the campaign. And the reality of it is that we elected 2 new board members who share the same idea about our mission as a board. And so I was really flabbergasted. I did not think that was going to happen so easily. And I'm wondering if you were also surprised by, did you find yourself surprised by the alignment that you found from the existing board members?
Like I said, I don't know if I would characterize it as a surprise. I think that in discussing the fact that we all had commonality around academics as important for all of our children in the district. John's got young kids in the district. Debbie has young kids in the district. Phil has always been about academics and achieving the best outcomes for his children. And Laura, I know you've raised 4 great children who are all doing very well. So that didn't surprise me, that we could come together around a statement that included academics at the center, that everybody in this room is concerned about the community and bringing all the stakeholders together. So the fact that you added that at the end about accountability and bringing those together, that didn't surprise me. I was, again, I pleasantly, I wouldn't call it surprised, but I thought it was a great addition by John, talking about, leadership, that it's beyond academics, that we need to find ways to enhance the whole child from a leadership perspective and really send leaders beyond their time here at New Albany. The inclusion of each really, again, I'm not surprised. We all want what's best for each child, and we all we all have children that are different and have different strengths, and recognize that we want a district that can serve those strengths. So from that perspective, those things did not surprise me. And I do think that there is still, as you said, work to be done in terms of the how. How do we get to those outcomes? And perhaps that's where some of the additional dialogue, I'm hopeful that we'll also find a lot of common ground going forward. But the discussion really, really helps. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but I don't know if surprise is the right word, but given where I knew some of you better than others before we had a campaign, from that perspective, it was a reacquaintance that led us to a lot of commonality in our attempt to achieve the same outcomes. I feel like I'm in a Senate hearing, sorry.
Not sure what role you're in the Senate, but
I'm sorry, this might be a good pause just for a break.
Yes.
I don't know if these are your cars, but there are cars parked in where the buses have in bus spots. So you need to move to these horizontal
I'm right along here.
parking spots. You're fine. If you're in one of these
Great
diagonal
idea.
spots out here where the buses pull, you do need to move your car. So
Are we okay to 2.5 over there?
yes, as long as you're over in the
I'm right.
2.5 lot. If you're in these parallel horizontally parked spaces, you're fine. If you're in a
I'm not over there.
diagonal
I'm right
spot,
over
okay. You're on this sign.
You said black BMW, so.
I'm just trying to figure out, yeah, I know you are performing this. So what I'm trying to understand is your expectation, I mean, do you feel a little bit better even in the fact that
That's really good.
there are 3 of you now knowing
Didn't know you
a
had it
little
in here.
bit more about what is
Uh-huh.
the
That's really good. I like that.